They said they saw, but walked in dark.
Welcome back to the Rise of the Zodiac Book Club. Today we are doing something deliberately modest. We are taking one story record, RotZ-3.txt, and asking what its labels can help us identify, and where those labels have to stop.
So this is less decode the secret message and more learn how to read the card in the catalog.
Exactly. And because the story itself is inside today's approved scope, here's the spoiler posture. We are discussing its documented catalog record, not revealing an ending or reaching into later consequences. The point is how to use the record responsibly.
That distinction matters. The approved research establishes that the story index contains one row whose file name is RotZ-3.txt. It also establishes several values in that row. It does not give us permission to turn those values into a theory about the story.
Then our working question is simple. What does each field retrieve or organize? And what would we be adding if we asked it to explain meaning?
I like that, because metadata often looks more confident than it really is. A label is printed neatly, so it can feel like an answer.
A neatly recorded fact is still only the kind of fact it is. Accuracy does not make a file name into a theme or a category into a motif.
That is our promise for this episode. We will identify the approved record, look at its documented fields, test one tempting overreach, and leave two questions open because the evidence leaves them open. Let's begin with a fixed point. What do we actually have?
We have one index record with the file name RotZ-3.txt. The research packet also identifies a locally available story source with that exact file name.
Does saying the source is locally available tell us anything about the story itself?
No, it tells us that the reference source can be located. That is useful for provenance and future verification. It is not a literary conclusion.
I would put two boxes on the board. In the first, identity. In the second, meaning. The file name belongs in the identity box. It helps us point to the same object consistently.
And the .txt ending?
That is part of the approved file name. It tells us how the source is named as a file. We do not need to make it carry any larger significance.
So even at the first step, restraint is practical. If someone says, "Which story do you mean?" the file name answers. If someone says, "What does that story ultimately mean?" the file name does not.
Right. The source priority rules also matter in the background. If records conflict, the project requires the conflict to be recorded rather than silently blended. But for this episode, we have not established that any source records do conflict about RotZ-3.txt.
That is one of the open questions, isn't it?
Yes, whether any source records disagree about its metadata remains open. We should not speak as if we found a conflict, and we should not speak as if we prove there is none.
That middle position can sound awkward, but it is actually clear. One indexed record is documented. A broader conflict check has not been settled here.
And that gives us our first useful habit. Say what the record establishes. Then separately say what review has not established.
The approved record gives us several values. Let's take them in small groups instead of reading a wall of fields.
The record gives a canonical date value of 283,333,333. It records the error as Promoter Pulse, the Zodiac as Cancer, and the collection membership count as 4.
Start with the date. What is the safe use?
Chronological placement. The date helps locate the story in the project's documented time structure. It can organize retrieval and comparison.
And the unsafe leap would be something like, because it appears at that date, this event caused something later.
Correct. Chronology can establish order or position when the underlying records support it. It does not establish causation by itself.
So the date answers were in time question, not automatically a why question.
Exactly. Next we have era primordial pulse. That is a documented category assignment in this record.
Can we use the era name as a summary of the story's conflict?
Not from the approved evidence here. The packet establishes the assignment. It does not establish that the era label is spoken in the story, that it names the story's central conflict, or that it determines a character's choices.
Then the category can guide a future question, perhaps how stories assigned to that era compare, but it cannot answer that question before anyone reads and verifies the stories.
That is a useful distinction. A category can be a retrieval path. It is not a verdict.
The Zodiac field works the same way.
At this evidence level is the documented value is Cancer. We may say that the record assigns the story to Cancer. We may not turn that assignment into a personality diagnosis, a destiny claim, or an explanation of the story.
That is probably where readers feel the strongest temptation, because Zodiac language arrives with a lot of familiar associations.
And this episode does not authorize us to choose among those associations. We can recognize the assignment while leaving its usefulness as a reading lens for another properly supported discussion.
Then the fourth value is collection membership count 4. The safe statement is that the record reports 4 memberships.
Do we know which 4 from this episode's approved material?
Not as part of this design. We should not name 4 collections, rank them, or explain why the story belongs in each one.
But the count still teaches something.
It teaches that one source can be retrieved through more than one collection structure while remaining the same source. It does not tell us what those structures mean, which one is best, or whether one outranks another.
Let me try the whole inventory in plain language. The file name identifies the source. The date places it in the recorded chronology. Era and Zodiac are category assignments. The membership count tells us how many collection relationships are recorded. None of those fields alone tells us what the prose means.
That is within the evidence boundary.
Good. And notice what we did not do. We did not decode a serialization string. We did not claim a conflict. We did not describe the plot. We used the fields for the functions the approved record can support.
I want to stay with the phrase retrieval path because it sounds useful but a little abstract. What changes for a reader when a story can be found through date, era, Zodiac, or collection membership?
The question that brings the reader to the story may change. A chronology question may bring attention to temporal position. An era collection may invite contextual comparison. A Zodiac collection may invite a category-based lens. A collection relationship may place the source beside a different set of stories.
We should keep that conditional. Those are examples of the kinds of questions metadata can organize. This episode does not establish what any particular comparison will conclude.
So metadata can shape the doorway without changing the room.
That metaphor helps, as long as we do not start claiming what is inside the room without looking.
Fair correction.
It also helps us separate 2 kinds of confidence. We can be confident that the record says primordial pulse. We cannot borrow that confidence for an interpretation the record never made.
The show's evidence rules distinguish documented fact, interpretation, speculation, and development history. The practical point is not to make every sentence sound technical. It is to avoid sliding from one class into another without noticing.
Could you give us the slide in its simplest form?
The record assigns Cancer is documented here. Cancer is a useful lens for this story would be an interpretation requiring support. The author assigned Cancer in order to communicate a particular hidden message would add an intention claim that this packet does not establish.
Same words in the neighborhood, very different levels of authority.
And the danger is greatest when the first statement is true. A true assignment can make the next unsupported sentence feel inherited rather than added.
That may be the most useful skill in this episode, noticing the moment when you leave the record.
Not because leaving the record is always forbidden, Interpretation is part of reading, but it should be recognized as interpretation and supported in a mission that actually approves the necessary story evidence.
Exactly. Today's design is intentionally narrower. It gives us the stopping point, not a new interpretation to place beyond it.
Let's test that stopping point. Here is the temptation. The record gives us a date, an era, a Zodiac assignment, and 4 collection memberships. Those fields look coordinated. Why not treat them as a coded summary of the story?
Because coordination in a catalog is not the same as a message in the story. I understand the appeal. If several labels line up on one row, it feels as if the row is telling us how to read.
Let's break the temptation into steps. First, the fields coexist in one record. That is documented. Second, someone proposes that their combination carries a particular meaning. That is an interpretation. Third, someone claims a combination was intentionally constructed to encode that meaning. That adds a creator intent claim.
The approved package supports the first step only. It also leaves open which serialization fields are fully documented for RotZ-3.txt. That means we cannot safely decode fields beyond the rules actually established.
What if the proposed decoding sounds plausible?
Plausibility does not complete the evidence chain. It may identify a question worth researching later. It does not convert a question into a fact for this episode.
So the correction is not, that interpretation is definitely false.
Correct. We do not have authority to prove it false either. The correction is, this approved evidence does not establish it.
That is a stronger method than simply being skeptical. It names the exact missing bridge.
And it avoids a different mistake, treating restraint as cynicism. We are not saying metadata is useless. We just spent time showing 4 useful functions:
Identity, chronology, category retrieval, and membership accounting.
Right. The unsupported inference asks those functions to become a literary conclusion. Once we remove that extra demand, the metadata becomes useful again.
There is also a reader experience benefit. If I know what a label can do, I can use it without feeling that I must solve it.
And if future evidence supports a richer interpretation, that interpretation can be evaluated on its own evidence. Nothing has been lost by waiting.
Then our working model changes a little. We began by asking where metadata stops. Now we can say why the stop matters. It protects both the reliability of the record and the freedom of interpretation from being mistaken for an archival fact. We promise to preserve 2 questions. Let's state them cleanly.
First, which serialization fields are fully documented for RotZ-3.txt. This episode does not answer that.
Which means we do not decode an unseen or partially documented structure just because the file name and record make us curious.
Correct. Second, do any source readers disagree about the story's metadata? This episode also does not answer that.
The careful form is important. We do not say there are conflicts. We do not say everything agrees. We say the conflict question remains unverified within this packet.
Could the episode still be useful with both questions open?
I think the questions are part of the lesson. They show the difference between a known record and a complete audit.
Yes, the source priority policy tells us what to do if a conflict is found, hit it rather than silently immerse it. But a policy for handling conflicts is not evidence that a conflict exists in this case.
And a reference to serialization rules is not evidence that every field relevant to the story has been fully documented. The presence of a system and the completeness of our knowledge about one record are separate questions.
That feels like a mature stopping point. Not we know nothing, and not the row explains everything.
We know exactly what this approved record says. We also know which next questions have not been answered here.
Let's gather the result once.
The evidence, the story index contains one row for RotZ-3.txt. That row records date BT 283,333,333 Euro Primordial Pulse Zodiac Cancer and collection membership count 4. The referenced story source is locally available.
The use of those values help identify, place, categorize, and retrieve the source.
The limitation they do not, by themselves, establish plot meaning, motive, causation, creator intent, the serialization, decoding, or the absence or presence of conflicting records.
And the open questions remain open. Which serialization fields are fully documented for the story, and whether any source records disagree about its metadata.
The practical habit is to notice the sentence where the record ends and our reading begins.
Then we can make that reading honestly when the right evidence and scope are available instead of hiding it inside a label.
A catalog can bring us to a story. It can tell us which source we mean, where a record places it, and which structures retrieve it. That is real value.
But the label is not a substitute for the story.
And an unanswered metadata question is not an invitation to invent an answer.
Read the record for orientation. Read the story for the story. Keep the bridge between them visible.
That is our stopping point for RotZ-3.txt. Confidence in what is documented, restraint about what is not, and room for better supported questions later.